I'll add 5 minutes more. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Um, Hello. I'm so delighted that so many of you are here. It's This session is something that we dreamed of some time ago, and we're very excited to be able to present. Data is power, and there's really no substitute for it. We all know that sexual harassment is a huge issue in India, but as long as we don't have data, it's all anecdotes. Your anecdotes versus mine. It's going down. It's only that kind of women. It's only in those places, etc. For this reason, Pramod Bhasin, who's on the stage, has been encouraging us in the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab to try to collect some real data about sexual harassment. And it's the results of that we'll present today. And in particular, what's even more powerful than data is disseminated data. And this audience here allows us a chance to disseminate to a group of people who are directly living the life which will be described by this data, and for whom these are real life events, and who will no doubt be willing to join us in our quest to do something about it. So I am really grateful to JLF for giving us this opportunity to present these results here. Thank you, JLF. And very excited to be speaking to you as a panel. We have a wonderful group of panelists. The way we're going to go, I'm going to ask Seema Jayachandran, who was the lead scholar in this data collection project, to present the results, and then we'll have a panel discussion. At the end of the panel, Pramod Bhasin will give some closing remarks and make an exciting set of announcements, A, about an NGO he's setting up, Aparajita, to fight these issues, and B, a competition that I won't tell you about, but he will. So with that, I invite Seema to the stage.
All right, thanks Abhijit, and thanks everyone for being here. We're really honored by this large turnout. So like Abhijit, I'm a social scientist. Okay. Yeah. So like Abhijit, I'm a social scientist, and I use data and statistical analysis to understand social problems in society, and to gain insights into how to solve them. And one important problem in society is sexual harassment and violence. As Abhijit said, we can use anecdotes or our personal experience to try to understand the scope of the problem, but the risk there is that we get it wrong. That leads us to minimize the problem or maybe to overstate it. And that's because we only hear the anecdotes of the few dozen people in our social circle, and more importantly, our social circles are not representative. And so what we are trying to do in this report is to reach a representative sample of women in 2 cities to really rigorously quantify and describe the problem of sexual harassment in cities. All right, so the way we did this is by conducting 10-minute surveys of women in public spaces in Jaipur and Delhi to quantify specifically the prevalence of sexual harassment in public spaces. Now, it's important to note that this is only one type of the violence and harassment women face. They also face it at home, for example, and harassment and violence is only one part of the broader challenge of gender inequality. So why did we focus on this? We focused on this because we believe it's an important part of this broader problem, and it's a component of it where there was very little data. And our hope is that by collecting and presenting to you, disseminating data, that sparks action to try to solve this problem. So concretely, we surveyed about 2,000 women in each of Jaipur and Delhi. And they were residents of those cities, aged 19 to 40. And we picked public spaces where we were going to be able to reach women across age and caste and education. Okay, sorry. Okay. So we chose these places because they are places where a broad spectrum of women visit, bus stops and street markets or flea markets. And it's important to realize that maybe many people here don't go to bus stops very often, but we're all probably privileged relative to the typical person, and our goal was really to understand the typical woman's experience. So let me share the key findings, with the caveat that these are preliminary, but we were very excited to show you a sneak preview here at JLF. So here's the first set of numbers that I hope you take away from this. In the past 1 year, 1 out of 2 women in Jaipur and 2 out of 3 women in Delhi have experienced sexual harassment outside their home. So the yellow bar is Jaipur and the red bar is Delhi. And we see this across religion, caste, age, employment status. So yes, 20-year-olds experience harassment more than 40-year-olds, but 40-year-olds are still experiencing it at a very high rate. So what is this harassment? We asked women about many types of experiences they had. And so what I'm showing you here is the prevalence in the past year of women experiencing staring, catcalls, lewd gestures, being stalked in a menacing way, being flashed, being shown someone's genitals, and then more serious forms of sexual assault. And not surprisingly, the milder forms are more common, but what was striking to us is that even the more serious forms are very common. So 1/3 of women in Jaipur have been groped or stalked or flashed or experienced sexual assault in the last year, and the number is even higher in Delhi, 40%. So where does this harassment take place? We asked women, and the answer was everywhere. This is a quote from a woman we interviewed alongside the main quantitative study. We did some qualitative, open-ended interviews with women, and here is from one of our respondents in Delhi, where she said, "Women are not safe in any space in the city." And so here's the quantitative results to back up what that woman's personal experience was. The most common place where women are harassed is when they're going about their daily business, when they're walking on the street, taking a bus, shopping. But even in the what should be our safest spaces of hospitals and schools and places of worship, women are experiencing harassment and violence. One of the misperceptions about sexual harassment is that it only happens to women, or it's women who take foolish risks. For example, it mostly takes place at night. And so we asked women about their most recent experience of sexual harassment. What's floating through the slideshow is for the different forms of harassment, and the red bar is the daytime, and you could see that 75% of harassment is happening in broad daylight. And this includes the more serious forms of harassment and violence. So we shouldn't be expecting women to not go out at night and only go out in the daytime, but even if they did, that wouldn't protect them, that wouldn't shield them from experiencing sexual harassment. What I've talked about so far is women's experience of being harassed. What's important to remember is that's only part of the harm this does to women. The other part of the harm is that it's always weighing on women's minds. They're worrying about it, it's influencing what they do, how they feel when they're outside. And so here's another quote from a woman we spoke with, who was talking about the burden of having to think about this every time she goes outside. And we asked quantitative questions to get at that sense of anxiety and fear women have. We asked them, when you go out, is this particular form of sexual harassment, it doesn't make you anxious at all, it makes you a little bit anxious, or extremely anxious. And 2/3 of women report feeling extremely anxious when they go outside their home about at least one of these forms of sexual harassment. And if we take the metric of how many have at least some anxiety, they're at least a little bit of anxiety, over 95% of women experience anxiety about this problem. And so this is something that's affecting every woman almost every time they leave their house. Hopefully everybody who's come believes in the importance of this topic from a human rights point of view. Women have the right to freedom from violence when they leave their homes. If anybody needs more convincing, let me give you a pragmatic or a consequentialist reason to care about this problem, which is it prevents women from fully contributing to the economy, and therefore it drags down the Indian economy. There's lower growth, less innovation, less development. And so we asked women, is this anxiety about harassment, both on your commute and in the workplace, is that influencing your decision to work? And 70% of women said this was important in their decision of whether to work. And it's not just whether to work. The bar on the right is it's where to work. A woman might choose to work, but say, I'm going to work at home, so I don't have to go out. Or she might say, I'm going to work just very close to my home, so my commute is short. And so she's turning down the job that would be more lucrative and rewarding for her and more productive for the economy because she's using her talents in a better way because of this problem. So 90% of women say that the fear of sexual harassment is influencing where they choose to work. So those are the main highlights of our study. There's a lot more, but in this brief time, I wanted to give you those highlights. So let me just recap what I hope you take away. 1 out of 2 women in Jaipur and 2 out of 3 women in Delhi in the past year have experienced sexual harassment outside their home. It cuts across caste, age, religion, economic status, and much of it is quite serious forms of sexual harassment. Most harassment happens during the daytime. This is not something you should or can blame on women's choices. And beyond those experiences, it's a constant travel companion for women. It is what is weighing on women as they make their decisions of going out and what to do. And that's a very heavy psychological burden to bear. And finally, this is not just a human rights social problem, it's also an economic problem because sexual harassment is preventing women from fulfilling their potential and fulfilling what they can in terms of contributing to the Indian economy. So we hope that these results are going to spur more conversation, that we get discussion going starting today, and as importantly, more importantly, that it spurs action. The A in JPAL is action, and we would love for more solutions and activism to solve this problem. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Seema. That was unfortunately deeply depressing, but it's what it is. It's a good place to start. I almost want to say that things can only get better from here, but looking at the country where I live, the US, it's not always obvious. But that is maybe. I want to start with Aruna Roy. Aruna, if you know this. These numbers didn't surprise you. But is there some broader social context, broader context of, the diversity of life in India that, you think is useful as a kind of a coda to these results? Something that will comment on that.
Yeah, I think it's congratulations, Seema. It confirms what many of us feel, that women have just begun to leave home, and the middle class, working class, has had no options. And that's why I think we must make a class difference when we look at women. And we also have to make a caste difference when we look at women. And as soon as we talk about religion, then there is so many intersectionalities and variations that without these considerations, I think we may make mistakes. So what you said is largely true of the middle class woman, I would say, but not so true of the working class woman. And she has no choice, and she would never say that I'd rather stay at home. She has no choice. She has to go out to work every day. So what are these intersectionalities? I think these intersectionalities change from place to place. And I welcome the survey, but if there is any conclusion to be drawn from the survey, then it must be conducted at various places with all these differences taken into consideration, the cultural differences taken into consideration. Even the questions will have to change, because the kind of harassment they face in different places in India are different. And I think that's why one feels that my book, that Personal is Political, and the way I've thought all my life, is that all these issues are right, and things like surveys produce technical support to the issues that we feel are relevant. But solutions are all democratic, political, socio-economic. Solutions can never be through a gadget or through an app or through some of those things. It's completely impossible. And I think that, and as we have seen in NREGA and other areas, that we when we bring in the app, we actually increase the problem. So any kind of radical change, which is both incremental, will produce unpredictable results. And those may not be what we actually want to do, but we may end up with them. And last, of course, you'll give me a chance at the end to talk about the future. So I shall reserve the rest of it for that. But surveys, of course, are always welcome. But Abhijit, if you'll pardon me, I read a book when I was an undergraduate saying how to lie with statistics. And it's kind of stayed in my mind. And I feel that statistics are extremely relevant. They're important, but at the same time, one has to have a healthy respect and disrespect for statistics. So that's how I'm made. So that's why my politics.
I entirely agree. I think that's why all of us should take ownership of statistics. Ask the question, where did this data come from? How did you measure it? Look into the details of what we do. We would love everyone to join our community exactly for that reason. Vrinda, again, you have many things to say. I'll start you off on something maybe predictable, which is much of this happens outside any contact with the law. Is there any space within which, any place for legal interventions within the current, with the way the Indian legal system functions? Is there something that's happening, something that's relevant that you have noticed where the law plays an important role, or you think this is all beyond the law?
So first, thank you for doing a survey on sexual harassment. And I think it's important to make that distinction, because there seems to be a social obsession with only looking at rape in this country and feeling angry only about rape. And that anger need not necessarily be productive. So I'm very glad we are today focusing on sexual harassment, which, as your survey shows us, is part and parcel of women's daily life in the public space. Just to take forward, and I totally endorse everything that Aruna has said, but to just add one more strand in that, that when we are looking at surveys and looking at data, and Abhijit began with data as power, but it would depend who's controlling the data and who has access to data, and that's a larger democratic question that we have to discuss in this country. And of course, we don't have a census, and we don't know when there will be a census, but we do have some data from NFHS, etc. Coming to the question of law and this. So I remember when we were young and in college, and sexual harassment in buses, we used to have university specials, which of course as the country is becoming more economically powerful, facilities of that kind are not available to ordinary people. But there would be sexual harassment regularly, and we would get together and fight on the streets and, figure it all out. In India, there is today both a civil law and a criminal legal provision on sexual harassment. Why did we even need to put this into the law? Because the law is saying what is the normative conduct expected and what is a wrong. I think in India, it's, many people here would have had these discussion that a particular misconduct by a man or a boy, is it even a wrong? And so law has to step in to say all those things. Am I therefore suggesting that these women, these girls who are your respondents, are going to actually march to the police station or ask for any, accountability through the law? That's not happening. And many women who I interact with in my professional life, I don't encourage them to go running to the police station, because we have not made a legal system that is either accessible or enabling, and that process should not be further debilitating. But what is important is that it has spelt it out, unfortunately in our society, what is a wrong towards women. Unless and until it is spelt out in black and white, I think there is ambiguity around it. So it's good that it has said so, but the impunity for it absolutely persists. And I think the other element that I would just touch upon here is that when we talk about public spaces and we talk about sexual harassment, I think what Aruna has indicated already, yes, the crime is perpetrated by individuals, and a prosecution or accountability through even the civil remedy of through the POSH Act, etc., may be individual. But there are systems that are giving rise to this. And it's not just that we are bystanders to the system, these are structures at play. And some of them have already been referred to, whether it is patriarchy or whether it is caste. But I think since we do have an eminent economist here, we cannot shy away from what are economic changes doing, because I think that's the link that there seems to be a reluctance to make with gender-based violence. It's something that everybody is concerned about, but we will not discuss it with land acquisition and impoverishment, etc. So I think those, unless we start putting the missing blocks in place, this survey result is not going to turn around.
Okay, on that cheerful note, I want to come back to Aruna before coming to Seema. You said something, Aruna, that I guess I think it's potentially, it's the opposite of what my instinct is. But you know more, but I wanted you to elaborate, which is this. My sense is that I've spent a fair amount of time for example, in rural Rajasthan, and I would say there is. It's not that there isn't a huge amount of sexual harassment. It's just a lot of protective steps are taken inside the community, which already diminish women. So, women pull their ghungat whenever some men show up. They instantly, you're in a meeting, there's no man around, and they pull their ghungat down. Or, there's a set of steps. So it's not clear to me whether it's precisely the fact that, in today's Indian society, urban women maybe resist those extreme defensive moves that makes the rural setting different, Or is it the case, that the defiance of a certain kind of extremely repressive norm, that's the reason why the rural setting is, in the urban setting is different? Or is it that the rural setting is intrinsically, because people have to work outside, it's different intrinsically because of that? You suggested maybe the latter, but I'm not convinced necessarily.
I think basically all women are targeted for the same reasons, more or less. I mean, doesn't change at all. But in a rural area, culturally, men cannot do some things. The public spaces are restricted, segregated, for instance. So some kind of protection may come from that, but there are as many cases of terrible sexual harassment amongst rural women as in urban areas, only the manifestations are different. So, I mean, it's not as if it's all peaceful, not at all. And actually, I've learned about sexual harassment because I've spent the last 50 years in rural India only from my rural friends. And I know they are terrible. And so, all these areas are different from the ones that you say meet in Jaipur or Delhi. So, if you want to understand, and I'm not saying that this is incorrect, but I'm just saying the manifestations are very different. So in a rural area, it might be congestion, just as you say, in buses, congestion in taxis and so on. But it's also the way in which a woman is treated within the community of going out, fetch water. There's so many issues in which there are continual pressures. And also caste. There is a general feeling that women who belong to the lower caste can be treated anyhow, which is something you don't get in an urban area, but you definitely get it in a rural area. And also now with the growing kind of segregations, new kinds of segregations that we are planning, and the kind of education that has come, I don't know whether I should grace it with the name of education, but with the kind of propaganda that has come, that women of a certain community are born to be exploited. I mean, these are all issues which are actually socio-political issues. And ultimately, the man who decides, and it's generally a man, the judge, there are very few women, and the man, he's so subject to all these prejudices himself, and the police, of course, is so subject to so many of these prejudices themselves, that they can't do anything. But there's one thing we have done in Rajasthan, which has kind of resolved some of these issues, and that is the Mahila Suraksha Kendra, which we have got attached to many police stations in Rajasthan, and particularly in Jaipur. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there are 24 Mahila Suraksha Kendras attached to the police stations. So a woman who goes to the police station, as Vrinda said, and even I, as though I used to be in the Indian Administrative Service, when I enter a police station, I know that I'm a woman and I feel that I may be harassed, even at this age. But these women can go in now, and there are these women who sit there for many hours to ensure that they can go in and talk to the police without feeling fear. And that has considerably reduced the, instead of saying, let me put it the other way around, it has increased the possibility of getting some kind of attention and justice. Actually, what I would do is to say that whole of Rajasthan, including rural Rajasthan, which doesn't have this, because it's only a district headquarters, I would say all block headquarters should get Mahila Suraksha Kendras, so that we can go and talk to women rather than men about these issues and get a sympathetic ear.
Wonderful. We're going to definitely come to sort of what your thoughts are on what we should be doing, but I want to come to Seema, and I haven't forgotten. You threw me a bait for an economist. I will take the bait, but let me wait till I bring Seema in. So, Seema, I actually thought that exactly the nuances of how do you collect this data? What do you think? What are the kinds of things you think felt difficult to get at? What have we not got at? What do you think, if you had a lot more time with these people, what would you get at? It seems it's coming to this data question. Exactly how to lie with data, but also how to just forget things because we have data. I think that's just as dangerous.
Yeah, great. Let me start by agreeing with Aruna that we were aiming for urban areas, and so when I say we're describing sexual harassment, it's very much in these two cities, urban, and not every city, Jaipur and Delhi. We're starting data collection in Bangalore, but one of the things I didn't mention is that most women, we asked them who the perpetrator was. When it's in their workplace, it's their manager or their coworker and sometimes their customer. But in public spaces, it's people they don't know. And so that's going to be very different in rural areas. The fact that in urban areas, there's anonymity. You don't know people. In terms of what did we not learn from this? Plenty. And every method has benefits and downsides. In this case, if you ask people to stop for a survey, they're not going to want to talk to you for an hour. And so we kept it short. And if we kept it short, we were asking questions to really get some the most important overall statistics, but we didn't. We had some qualitative interviews to follow up, but I think understanding how this is influencing women beyond the exact experience is important. We asked some questions, but we could have elaborated much more on how they reacted in the moment, how other people reacted in the moment. I think when you ask us what to do in the future, I think bystanders is a part of that answer. So I think the other piece of this that I'm sure we're seeing some underreporting, because when in a longer conversation, you can build rapport with someone and they might feel much more comfortable talking to you. And so whatever numbers I showed you, I'm convinced they are an underestimate. And then let me just add one more thing, which is what we saw in the qualitative interviews that was quite depressing is many women were blaming women or accepting of this, so sort of resigned to the problem. And I think kind of understanding that more is something where future research, whether it's our quantitative methods or more open-ended conversations, would be very illuminating.
My mother used to say that the most striking thing, she was a scholar of women's labor force participation. She used to say that one of the most striking thing about India is not just the low women's labor force participation, but also the fact that unlike, for example, even in Bangladesh, women, once they finish their education, don't take up a job before they get married. And I suspect that has a lot to do with their families feeling what happens if she goes out and something happens to her. And I think that, so in that sense, it's not just that they are not working, it's also that their marital life is transformed by the fact that they are not free to go out whenever they want. I wanted to quickly respond, maybe provoke a response from Vrinda. So I don't know, I have this sense that you mentioned the many failures of our economy, but it seems to me that a potential candidate is a sort of a halted or a little bit of mobility, but just a tiny bit. So people see the world, they see that there are somehow many options in the world. It's not a very structured society where you do this at 18 and you get married, and there is both social media and everything they see around them suggests possibility, but the possibility is outside their reach. So there is a little bit of mobility. They see it's no longer the closed world of where everything was you got married at 16 and that's how it was. So possibilities have opened, but not for them. And I think for the men. And I think that's really a critical piece of the story here. So as an economist, I would I wanted you to react to that maybe slightly different reading of the economics.
So I think the fact that we are talking about sexual harassment here is in no small measure because women are not accepting that kind of behavior. It's not just because somebody has one day thought, let's talk about these things. And I think it would be very important to mention, we are in Jaipur, Aruna is here, many other friends are in the audience. We in India, the women and everybody else, has learnt the term, the legal term sexual harassment because of Bhavari Devi, who was gang raped, and the Vishakha judgment given by the Supreme Court, which emerged from the women's struggle here. So yes, there is mobility, and yes, they are finding answers, and we moved from eve teasing to sexual harassment through feminist interventions. And the mobility is, I think it's very clear women are not going to stop either economically or socially. Politically, you see women voting in larger numbers than ever before. At the same time, since you did draw upon the US, in the US elections, if abortion was an issue, of course, it took them nowhere. But in Indian elections, except for the instrumentalization of violence against women, rape of women, it doesn't actually become an issue. So I think there are some hurdles we are still facing, and even women as a voting constituency, how will that impact? As far as economics would be concerned, will we keep being the dole being handed out, or will there be more? And I think we are at that very interesting juncture, and I actually have no pessimism or hopelessness in this regard. I think there will be forging ahead.
Good. At least someone here is being optimistic. Aruna, we have 8 minutes before I'm going to call Pramod for his closing remarks. What if you had to? You already talked about the Mahila Suraksha Kendras. Is there any one other thing that you would think of as being relatively easy, should be done, it doesn't require transformation of society, but can be done now?
I think I have an inherent dislike of one single solution, but since you are asking more for it,
That's my professional commitment.
Well, anyway, I think it's all a bundle of solutions. But one thing I think in India, the men in our society need to be educated. I think there's a fundamental reason why these things happen. And I think what we need to understand is that they need to understand what they are doing, their vulnerabilities, and society as a whole has to understand why these young men are so frustrated. Because they are jobless, they are on the streets, the unemployment levels have gone up so high, and that this produces all kinds of quirks in behavior and social behavior. So I really think we have to look at why sociologically and politically it has increased.
Can I jump in this?
Yes. Seema, you wanted to
on what can we do?
Yeah, we all of us are,
After Seema.
Seema, you want to go build on that, or what the
Okay,
evidence?
So I completely agree with this of trying to change how people are socialized, and some of that is in the family. And I see Sonali Khan in the audience. We have a project together through JPOW where it wasn't about sexual harassment, but working in schools, and that was specifically focused on having both boys and girls support gender equality. I'm now trying to start something that's about masculinity norms. It's hard to be an adolescent boy. It's both the economic challenges that you started talking about, Abhijit, of joblessness or things you want out of reach. But in many ways, being an adolescent boy is hard, or being a young man. And so, how do we help young men kind of understand their emotions and empathize with them? Because that clearly is not the only part of the problem or solution, but I think it can be very helpful in making progress on this problem.
But have you seen any results on these interventions of trying to change the norms among adolescent boys?
That was a softball question. So in this this project with Breakthrough, we
Shohini is here as well.
Yeah. So that was a program that Breakthrough developed that at JPOW we evaluated with really amazing results. That there's no one solution, so it doesn't solve all of the solution, but it made both adolescent girls and adolescent boys more supportive of gender equality. And what we found is that most of the actual conversion into behavior change was from boys. And that's partly because they have the power in society, maybe not for a good reason, but their behavior attitude change translated into behavior change immediately, and it persisted. And I think it's also the power of data and evidence, because on the basis of that JPAL study, the states of Orissa and Punjab are now scaling that program up so that all secondary school students are going to get this multi-year program trying to build this support for gender equality, both among girls and, importantly, also boys.
Vrinda.
Okay, so very quickly, since the survey shows us, and we know that the problem is so pervasive, so what can we do? What the state does, others do. What are we going to do in our homes? Because the people who are doing sexual harassment, the men, are not dropping from somewhere else. They are in our midst. So what are we going to do? Stop policing the girls and women in your family. Police and discipline the men a little bit and the boys a little bit. Respect the girl and women's choice. What she studies, where she works, whether she wants to marry or doesn't want to marry, who, when, where, respect that. Lastly, give equal property rights to all the women in your family. Turn it around yourself.
I'm almost, that should have been the climax, but we have a few more minutes, so I still want to continue. Aruna, you want a bundle of solutions, but the fact that, do you think that can start with something like what Seema described, which is a curriculum in school, or you think that's too superficial?
No, curriculum in school is not superficial, it's important. But my point is, will the educational system in India allow you to do that? Today, for instance, many things that we thought were of value are being expunged from our curriculum. Decisions are made not in the state headquarters but in New Delhi. So how are we going to impact all these systems? How are we going to get this into it? Is again a political issue, and again we'll have to agitate and get it there. And I hope they don't. You might program a very good program and a very good curricula. I hope they won't put it into that there are only certain sections of society, certain religious groups, or certain castes that are prone to it. So you'll have to police it.
Fair enough. Seema, you want to have one closing word? Each of you get one closing word.
Yes. First, thank you for this wonderful discussion. I think what I hope people take away from this is, that data has some value, and that you can understand and the importance of a problem and gain insights into how to solve it. It's never going to be the be-all and end-all. The world is complex, but I think through a combination of activism, civil society, other research methods, and our bread and butter as JPAL researchers of thinking about potential solutions and evaluating their effectiveness, I think that's very powerful. If we can scale up across not every state, but some states, something similar to what we saw for the other intervention, but around masculinity norms, that would be wonderful.
Ah, okay. We have a. Okay, couple of questions, and then you. We have still 8 minutes. Okay. Yeah, according to them. Okay, then I'm going to let the audience. Is that okay?
Quickly say
Yes, you can go
Well,
ahead.
I'll quickly say just, like all simple statements, it'll have problems. But even collection of data will have to be participatory, not you're asking a question, getting them an answer, but collecting the data, going back to them, feeding the data into a large community, looking at its caste, other kinds of compositions, making them accept it as their value, then data is worth it. But otherwise, if it's data seen from above and put into a book, I don't think it has that kind of value. So it has to become political. So even data has to become a political tool, has to be participatory, socio-political,
One line.
economic.
Yeah,
Literally one sentence. We have to move out of the safety framework to freedom for women as equal citizens of this country.
Okay, I have been instructed. I'm going to take 2 questions, and it's totally unfair, but I'll take you. Yes, go ahead. And a question and short. Doesn't need a preamble.
Okay, I'll try that because I have a habit of talking too much. But, I was called to a office to talk about sexual harassment, and I carried the Vishaka guidelines with me. And 10 minutes into the conversation, I was taken aside and said, "Ma'am, ये मत बोलिए because हर रोज हमारे पास एक problem आएगी." And so that's when I thought that schooling is probably the right way, and maybe even just getting mothers to, go through a kind of workshop where they can also understand how to get better sons and men into the society. So that was my
Okay,
take.
that's a comment, but that's a great comment. Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
One of the questions I have is the role of Bollywood and films in sexualization. Don't you think that's a real important thing to address?
Vrinda, you want to take that since you had some?
So just to say, I think there's a lot that contributes to just point to films and what are we, there is sexual harassment in film, but we are not against sexuality. I think we'll have to draw those distinctions. We don't want to become devis over here. We are ordinary people, we are regular people, we want to be treated like regular people. Because there's a fine line and we'll have to be a little careful where we are drawing that. The censor board would be delighted otherwise.
I totally agree. One last one. No, you over there. Yes. Somewhere. Yeah. Go ahead. Yes.
So AI has been used to spread a lot of information, disinformation, very effectively. And my question to you today is, can AI be used for creating social behavior or communication change? And sort of...
Okay.
We can't
yes,
hear you
we
clearly.
got it. I think that AI be used for social change.
social behavioral communication change and changing those toxic sort of masculinity and changing those norms?
I'm going to take this one. I feel that I think that there are many things, but maybe AI can do. This is not the. I think there are plenty of things we can do based on what we know, which we aren't doing. If we did them, we would make a lot of progress. And I will wait on AI being the most important part of that. And with that, I'm going to invite Pramod Bhasin to give the closing remarks.
May I take this? This has been a wonderful discussion indeed. Thank you very much to the panel. It's been fantastic, and Abhijit for leading it. It is my privilege to be in partnership with JPAL, with our NGO that we are launching today, which I'll talk about, called Aparajita. But my starting question to all of you is, and especially to the men in the audience, is that can we truly live in a country where 95% of women are anxious when they leave home? Can we do that? I mean, is that acceptable under any fashion in any way? And more than anything else, I ask the men to step up and say, we're going to change, we're going to try and do something, we're going to talk to people, we're going to talk to our children, our brothers, our colleagues, everybody else. I also think the complexity of the problem is enormous, as Aruna has pointed out, as Vrinda has pointed out. This is not going to be solved easily. This is going to be a 10, 15, 20-year journey or longer. This is not going to be applicable to apps that you can flourish. But as as an entrepreneur, and a businessman, I have been the founder of a company called Genpact, which started the BPO industry. 50-60% of our employees were women. We saw this firsthand. And one of the people that we spoke to in our surveys and our landscaping work with the NGOs said something to me that I'll never forget, which again, I think, Vrinda, you've said it, which is, women need to have the freedom of the city and the country just like men. And I don't think men begin to realize how limited that is in terms of what women can do versus we ordinarily think we can do very easily every single day without batting an eyelid, without thinking about it, while women at the same time would struggle with those very simple things. We're going to move? I'm not going to walk through all these slides. You've seen them before, we've discussed it, but 95% say they are anxious about being sexually harassed when they leave home. And it influences their decision making at every level. In the rural, urban areas, many of us here live in our bubbles. We live in our cars, in our offices, etc. When you talk about women in public spaces, working in the unorganized sector, in rural areas, in urban areas, the impact this has on their decision are enormous. And it undermines their confidence. And they fear reporting incidents to the police. All our surveys have shown us that the number of incidents reported to the police are less than 5%. It is a ridiculous number. And that's why, Vrinda, you're right. The actual framework for law has not been, is not in place at all. At the same time, we have very little quality data. I appreciate the point about statistics. I appreciate the point about data. One of the main reasons to collect this data is to show it to the world as to the extent of the problem. I will tell you that when I talk to CEOs, when I talk to companies, most people, most men and CEOs do not understand the scale of the problem. Or they believe that their posh system is working when it's not, or they believe that they have adequate safeguards when they don't realize that actually majority of the effort goes unreported. There's underreporting, as we've talked about, and importantly, today there are very limited solutions as to what can be done in this area, which is a tragedy because for me, this is the elephant in the room in India. We cannot be a country of 1.2, 1.3 billion people, 50% women, and facing a problem as pervasive and all-encompassing as this one. That's kind of why I started down this road and decided to work with JPAL, because the data isn't there, the data isn't available, and the reason we're trying to go down to root cause is to understand what we can do to actually try and solve for it. I wanted to introduce Aparajita, which is a new NGO we are forming. I'm getting a lot of help from the JPAL team. It's been launched by me, but of course I hope we will get many, many partners. And I hope many of you will join the network that we are planning to build over this. And we make this a very long 5, 10, 15-year journey, which is impactful. We will work at the intersection of public spaces, of law and order, of home, of colleges and institutions, because this is an issue that affects women across their life cycle. Why have we come together? To bridge the data gap, to solve this problem through evidence-based solutions so that we don't try and find easy solutions to the most complex problem that I can think of. I won't go through these slowly. The one announcement I did want to make at this point in time, I think many of you have been given these QR cards over here. I think many of you may have it. This will give you access to both the survey data as well as what we would like to do at this point in time is really launch an open funding call. The open funding call is really just a way of asking you, to all of you who are passionate about it, to seek out innovations, to ask you for your ideas, to come to us with the best ideas that you can have. Invite other people, talk to people you know who have talked about this in the past. Bring them to us, please. We have a place to collect the ideas. We have a place to judge them. We would love to fund these ideas. We will fund maybe 15, 20 of them, some up to 50 lakhs, some up to 10 lakhs, some up to 15 lakhs. But I hope these ideas will spur a wide range of solutions and potential ways in which we can launch initiatives to start tackling the problem. Whoops, I have to go back. Can I go back? I'm pressing. I'm pressing. Here we go. Thank you. All right, it's not coming through. But the basis is what we're saying is we'll do these, we'll do the funding of these innovations, and then we hope that will lead to better evaluations of the initiatives, of the effort that we're putting in to see how effective they are. And I hope we can work together with all of you, as well as with JPAL, of course, to do this. At the end of the day, though, the call is very simple. This is probably one of the most serious, complex issues that we face in our country. We have to come together. We have to increase awareness to a very significant level, because quite honestly right now, I don't know that there's a large proportion of people that understand how pervasive this issue is, how complex it is, and how it affects the life of every single woman that we know. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for having us. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Pramod. Thank you, the crowd. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the panelists.